Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our training this morning. We're so glad that you're here with us. My name is Ronnie Nolan. I'm director of the Kentucky Educational Collaborative for State Agency Children. We're hosting this session this morning with Teresa Rogers from the Kentucky Department of Education, who's going to be providing us with information on the financial literacy requirements for secondary education. And so we're really excited about that this morning. Glad you all can join us. We do have the chat feature open on the bottom, so we'll be following the chat throughout this session. So feel free to jump into those chats and let us know if you're having any questions or if there's anything we can do to make this training more accessible and better for you. So we're glad that you're here. Katie Helton is also from our staff is here this morning, and she can answer any questions you have about technical concerns, about ELA credits, PD credits, all of those kind of things. We'll be handling that as we go through this as well. So thank you for being here. We're excited that you're joining us this morning. And without further ado, to get us right into the bulk of our work this morning, it's my honor to welcome Teresa. Hi there. Thank you for joining us. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you so much, Ronnie. I'm glad to be able to talk to this group because this is such an important issue. It's been a pleasure to work with the professionals in the development of the standards, and I think they've developed just an exceptional product. So I am going to share my screen, so I apologize for the delay in doing that. Let's see, let me move my thing here at the top. Okay, I have been involved in development of several groups of standards. So this last group was the Financial Literacy and Career Studies Standards. And I'm going to go a little bit through the process of that, the organization of the standards, and then we'll actually take a look at some of the standards that is covered in there. So we're going to talk about the creation of the standards and the scope of those standards, as well as the strands within them, and then some materials that you might find helpful with people that you work with. So one thing of note here is the financial literacy standards. These are within the career study standards. You can find the standards, and I'll have this information at the end of the presentation, but kystandards.org is where Kentucky houses all of their academic standards. So every 6 years, we're under an imperative to revise and update the standards. So these were just recently approved just a few months ago. And within the career study standards, we have 3 domains. The first is careers. We have essential skills, which used to be employability skills. A lot of people refer to them as soft skills, but those critical skills that students need to have to be able to be successful in the workplace. And then we have the financial literacy standards that was come about. It is a graduation requirement for students in high school. The beauty of these standards is that they go from K to 12. So it's not as if students come to high school and it's like, oh, we have to talk about financial literacy. That should be a part of their development as they move through the grade levels. And please, if someone has a question, please just raise your hand or shout out. Sometimes I tend to ramble, and I don't mind a bit if you have a question that you'd like to ask. The scope of the standards, these standards are not tested. However, all schools are required to ensure that students have access to these standards K through 12. These can be integrated at the elementary and middle school levels through an integration, but typically at high school, we're going to see these in standalone courses. And I don't know if you're familiar with the student's individual learning plan, but this is a plan that students begin to create in 6th grade that really guides their education as they move through middle school and high school. And it works very closely with the standards that we have in the careers domain to help students discover their interest and take advantage of all of the opportunities that they have in high school to learn to earn industry certifications or dual credit. So that is a critical document for students to begin to work in and use as a planning tool. The standards are organized by domains. We have the primary, that's K to 3, intermediate, that is 4 to 5, middle school is 6 to 8, and high school is 9 to 12. Within each of those grade bands, you have a careers domain, an essential skills domain, and a financial literacy domain. The standards were created using multiple people, both teachers and stakeholders from within the community. I've highlighted in red here the people that were very important to developing these standards. The Business and Education Advisory Panel, we had 6 financial literacy professionals, as well as 4 educators. We had 3 high school educators, 1 post-secondary educator, and their task was to develop those big buckets or strands, which we call them. And then we brought in a revision and writing committee of educators, and their job was to fill in those buckets with pieces of information that students needed to know. Here is an image of the actual standards. So here with the red arrows, those were the buckets that the Business and Education Advisory Panel created. So they developed the strands. You can see the first one, careers, education, and income. And then the Revision and Writing Committee came in, and they actually wrote the standards based on feedback and guidance from the advisory panel. Within the financial literacy standards, we have 6 strands, and we'll look at those closer to the end of this presentation. We have careers, education, and income, and not looking just at how much income that they'll generate based on a career choice, but what is the cost of the career? Are there other ways to finance their college years other than student loans? We look at credit and debt, decision-making and money management, savings and investing, money and the economy, and then insurance and risk management. And these standards, as I said, this begins in kindergarten in that primary band and moves in a developmentally appropriate way up to the high school standards. I do want to talk about that legislative piece because we get a lot of questions about that. KRS 158.1411 says that students beginning this school year with that 9th grade class, that they have to complete 1 or more courses or programs that meet the financial literacy standards. And it also says that the Kentucky Board of Education must promulgate administrative regulations that establishes the standards for financial literacy. So I'm going to look at the third one here. The third part of this legislative piece says that the local school board decision-making council, they are the ones that determine the course offerings and the programs and how that they're going to provide that opportunity for students. And the big question that we get is how schools are going to do that, because based on the legislative demand, it does not have to be for a full credit. It can be a credit or a program. There's been a lot of concerns with that word program because there's been some fear that schools will offer a 3-hour program for students, and deem that that student has met those requirements. But I think when you look at the standards for financial literacy, you'll find that they are very in-depth and rigorous, and this really warrants a lot of time dedicated to that. So schools can choose different options depending on the student's individual learning plan. And we've come up with a few ways that most schools are doing this. Students that are pursuing a business or family and consumer science pathway, there are 2 courses that pretty well align to these standards. This is money skills and personal finance that a business teacher or a family and consumer science teacher can teach. But we also know that there's students that are pursuing multiple options in high school. So we wanted to look at what that would look like for those students. These same 2 courses can be taught by a math teacher for a math credit. So we've provided guidance to schools on what that would look like if they choose to provide a math credit or a CTE credit for those standards. That allows for students to take a dedicated course that would certainly meet the intent of the standards. A few other options for students that don't have room in their schedule for extra credits. There are a few districts that are working with post-secondary institutions to offer a dual credit or an articulated credit. So not only would the student get a math credit, but it would apply for their college credit as well. We caution students in doing this because we want to make sure that the credits that they're earning for the college level aligns with their educational learning plan. Schools can they can develop programs or some combination of course offerings. That might be something that is in a module or online learning. And then they could choose to do it through academic advising or enrichment sessions. This would be really difficult for schools to do just because we have students, and you know this better than I do, students that begin school at one school and they'll transfer mid-year, mid-semester to other places. So this would be really difficult to ensure that students are getting access to the full intent of those standards. And the last thing that the KRS mandate is that the Department of Education is to provide some direction to local schools in developing and implementing those standards. So to do that, we have developed some learning modules that are online at the kystandards.org to help the teachers become aware of what those standards are. So we're going to look at a few of the standards within the high school domain. These are the ones that are required for high school graduation. So here is the careers, education, and income strand. And as you look at this, it really moves beyond students Googling or researching a career and finding out how much money that they make. We really want them to look at what is the career, what is the cost of that education, and what's my potential income. And something that I was really excited to see is the third one where it talks about funding sources. So of course we have loans and scholarships, but the writing team really wanted the students to understand the difference between a scholarship and a grant and a loan. What are work study options? What options does the military provide for students? So we want students to pursue education after high school, but we don't want them to be saddled with tens of thousands of dollars of student loan debt, and maybe they don't finish that career because the impact to them as well as to our economy can be staggering. The next strand is credit and debt, getting them ready to enter the post-secondary world where there's multiple options offers for credit cards, and just what is the actual cost of that. Decision making and money management. This really goes into budgeting. What are the decisions that they make with a budget? What's the difference between a CD and a money market account? All of those things that we intuitively know as an adult, but maybe we had to learn them the hard way. So giving these students a heads up on making those decisions. Savings and investing. We really want the students to understand the opportunity cost of saving money versus spending. So introducing some of that language, helping them to be able to calculate compound interest. What are the different types of investment options? And of course, high school students, they're not going to grab in and understand fully what a mutual fund is. They may not understand the difference between a mutual fund and a stock or a bond, but at least they'll have that terminology in their vocabulary, and they'll be able to begin to make those decisions later on in life. And then money and the economy. What role does money play in the economy? And then just introducing some of the language. What do we mean by FDIC? What is a credit union? And what's the difference between a credit union and a bank? Some of those things that that will be important to them as they move on. What's the difference between Medicaid and Medicare, and what is Social Security? And can you count on that for your retirement income? So posing some of those questions to them, and then helping them to think about insurance and risk management. So what do we mean by insurance? What types are available? Why is it important for them as they begin their life out of high school? So this high school strand, it's very deep. And I think that you can see that it's really going to take quite a few hours of instruction and interaction with students, helping them apply some real world situations, budgeting for themselves to help them to be able to grasp some of these concepts. Here is the website that I mentioned earlier, the kystandards.org. So with this website, we have this, you'll be able to find the standards there, as well as tools and resources for teachers to understand what the standards are and how that they can implement those within their classrooms. The first tool that we have, these are available for all grade bands. So there is a tool that just helps the teachers to look at the standard, and especially in elementary and middle school, where this might fit into their curriculum. Is there content here that maybe they're not familiar with? I'm not a financial person, so a lot of that terminology with the risk management, that's really deep stuff. So helping the teachers have a place to look at the standards and see what they need to know to be able to implement those. In middle and elementary school, most of the time those standards are integrated into social studies, math classes. So just giving them a tool that they can look to see where there is a fit for a standard within the content that they teach, as well as a tool for a teacher dedicated to teaching financial literacy, just a tool to help them map that out over the course of that semester or that year. And we have an instructional resources alignment rubric. We get a lot of questions from schools and districts and teachers about what resources should we use to teach these standards. Kentucky is a local control state, so we cannot recommend or designate this is what you need to use to teach these standards. But we do provide a tool that any resource that they're considering to buy, that they can look at these key questions and help them to make the best decision for that resource. And we do have a list of resources for them. I'm going to exit out of this, and I'm going to take you to the Financial Literacy Resources webpage. If you go to the Department of Education website and you just Google Financial Literacy Resources, this page will come up. You will see the standards as well as those professional tools. But then we also have a lot of different organizations that have resources, free resources for teachers at all of the grade bands, elementary all the way through high school, so that schools can choose to purchase a curriculum if they want. But they are also welcome to use any of these others that they want. A couple of note, EverFi is an organization that all schools in Kentucky have access to. It's more of a supplement for schools, but it's an online learning platform for the students.
Teresa,
as well. Oh, go ahead.
We can't see the website that you're on. We're still on PowerPoint.
Okay, let me come back up to share
comments.
screen. Let me share my screen. Let's see if this will take. I don't have the red thing around it.
That worked.
It did? Did that work?
That worked for me. I think other folks.
Okay. So this is what I was referring to, the Financial Literacy Standards Resources. You can find that very easily just by searching the KDE website. Here are the standards link, and here are those professional learning materials for teachers. And then these are the organizations that we have added to our page. Teachers at the high school level have access to MBA Research and Curriculum Center. They have a full curriculum of resources, lesson plans, assessments, if they're implementing a financial literacy course. And then these others here, a lot of these are online lessons, activities, games, projects, interactive things for students that teachers can use and add to their classrooms. And I'm going to go back here, and I don't think we need that. I'm going to make this large. So if you have any questions, or teachers that have questions, the best contact about resources and the actual content of financial literacy is Betty Markin. She is the business and marketing consultant in the Office of Career and Technical Education, and her teachers are the ones that are teaching the majority of these courses. And she's also in contact with those math teachers that are teaching the courses. So she is the person to go to. My contact information is here as well. And I can help put you in contact with the right person. But as I said, I'm not a financial literacy person, so I probably would forward that on to someone else. Does anyone have any questions?
Teresa, first of all, thank you so much for sharing this information with us. I think one of the reasons that we ask you to come and talk with us today is all of our programs are state agency programs that are out there. These are alternative schools, kids who are in state care, under supervision or custody of the Commonwealth. And so we have a lot of transition within our programs. We have a lot of kids who move in and out. And so I think we're working on how do we effectively implement these new standards for our students to make sure they have the skills that they need to be successful beyond high school as well. So thank you for sharing that with us. I do have a couple of questions. One of the things is that we do note that starting this year that students must complete one course or program in the financial literacy to graduate. Could you share how that's being documented? So some variations of that so our folks would know Is there a tab in IC? Is there some other,
Yes.
what does that look like?
Yes, this is in the district assurances, and it falls under, there is, and I'll send you an email once we get off of here that tells exactly where that's at. But one of the assurances that the district offices have to sign off on is the assurance that all students have access to the Kentucky academic standards. So that the financial literacy standards are included in that. And I'll send that language to you if that would be helpful to you.
Great. I think that would be wonderful. And we can share that out with all of our folks, not just the ones on the call this morning. Could you tell me a little bit if maybe an example or how alternative schools and kind of those alternative learning environments might be addressing these that might be a little bit different than a traditional education setting? Has there been any discussion around that or any examples that you might be able to provide?
There hasn't, but I would love to have a conversation about that if there is something that we could, maybe some guidance or something that we could help make that assurance happen for those students. I would love to reach out and work with anyone. We have not had that conversation. We have talked a little bit about students with special needs, but that's a whole different ballgame. But if you would like to get together a small group to talk about it, I would love to, and maybe I could share some resources, because one of the things, and I'm not sure, I'm not familiar with your organization. What's the average term that students are in your programs? I'm sure that varies
It does.
across offices.
It does. We have a lot of different types of programs within our purviews. We have hospital settings.
Yeah.
We have long-term juvenile youth development centers for public offenders and others. So we have a wide variation. We have students as little as 3 days.
Yeah.
And so in those situations, I don't think this is where we're really
yeah.
concerned. I mean, we're expecting their home school to really handle those. But for students who we do have longer term, or even students that we have who are, most of our kids are 16 and 17-year-olds.
Okay.
Most of them, not all, but most. And so we have kids who are moving toward aging out of the system and who are moving toward graduation.
Yeah.
So we may be their last education setting before they transition to adulthood. And we want to make sure that anything that has been missed because of multiple transitions that they've had, maybe they've been in multiple placements, they've been in multiple homes and multiple schools over the years. And so their home schools, wherever that may be, may not have met this requirement. So we want to make sure that our folks are armed with the resources they need before a kid ages out, before they graduate, to make sure that they are getting the same experiences and skills.
Okay. Yeah, I would love to work with anyone to have those conversations and see if there's a tool or a resource that we could, or guidance that we could come up with. And students, I think about students that transition into those facilities, they're not bringing anything with them from the high school. There's not like an online platform, or there's not that continuity between the homeschool and where they're transitioned to, is there? Or is there?
Not necessarily. Our students move all over the state. So their home district may be Boyd County, and then they are in our program in Jefferson County. So there's not really that continuity between districts about how they're doing that. Why we're trying to make sure that our folks know about the requirement and we're making a plan of how we're going to meet the need.
Okay.
So that's kind of what I'm interested in. I did put a message out there a little bit earlier as you were doing your presentation to the participants on this call this morning, that I ask you to be thinking about how you're providing this currently in your alternative program. And so if there's anybody on the call this morning who would like to share what you're doing in your district, I think we'd love to hear that about how you're meeting this requirement. So if there's anybody out there who's interested in sharing that, we'd love to have your thoughts on that. Don't everybody jump in at once.
Hey, Dr. Nolan, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Dr. Ferguson. How are you?
Good, my friend.
Good.
You always been there for me. You got me where I am. So I just want to share. One thing we did was we used this Dave Ramsey course, and we did it throughout And then then I always went to PD that was offered by, the state or, other PD in the summer. And we implemented all of that into giving the kids a broad view of things. And then within that realm, we would always give them the autonomy to specifically focus on certain things. And we would incorporate that into the learning, which they were in awe of. And then it culminated into us competing against other schools in the stock market games. So we brought all the finance stuff together, and that caused them to be interested and have specific questions as to spending, how they spend, and it really gave them a view. They start to reassess what they were spending money on and why they were spending it, and it equated to how they wanted to live their life later on, which we could never done just by using a book.
Yeah.
So those are I did.
Thank you so much for that. That's exactly the kind of stuff I think we're looking for. Our kids and not just our kids, but all kids, learn best hands-on, interactively, when they have a real world connection to what's going on and the learning that's taking place. So I think those are great examples. Thank you, Dr. Ferguson, for sharing those with us. Appreciate you this morning.
The support from KEXAC has been immense too, because Katie and everybody down from you, when we reached out, if you guys didn't have it, you directed me to resources that could, and so it wasn't an obstacle for our kids not to get it if we really wanted to do it. I appreciate that part too.
Great, thank you. Other folks?
I'll mention that the other day when we had our SACSA meeting, my little individual group talked a little bit about financial literacy. And one of the programs mentioned that they use Dave Ramsey, and I know that several others do as well. But they mentioned that their bank bought the Dave Ramsey program for them. So that might be an avenue. I would not have thought about that. So I thought that was an excellent resource, is to get your bank to be able to help you with that.
Yeah. There's a lot of schools and districts that use the Dave Ramsey course. It is very in-depth, and it aligns very closely with the standards. So, and like Dr. Ferguson said, it provides a lot of opportunities. There are a lot of online things students can do, but really with financial literacy, they need that applying it to their life and actually applying those decision-making skills.
And I love the connection with your local bank, because part of this, the emergence, and Teresa talked about the legislation that is wrapped around this, but this really came from the business community.
Yeah.
The Kentucky Chamber of Commerce really led the effort to have financial literacy standards developed. So I think it's a great connection back to that business community who came forward first and said, this is a need. So it's not just identifying the need, but it's us going back to them after the need's been identified and saying, how can you help us now meet the need? So I think that's a critical part of this, and that's excellent work. So kudos to that district who's reaching out to their local business partners to make that happen. We appreciate that. We do have some comments over in the chat section of things that different folks are using. Jessica Montgomery teach, is it Bonzi? Teach Banzai?
Bonsai.
Bonsai, is that what it is? I'm reading that. I'm an emerging reader here this morning, so I'll take that. And then other folks who are using the Edmundum Plato format for personal finance and consumer math, also using those. Valerie Kazee in Rowan, free financial fitness for life webinar this evening at 7 o'clock. So, and she put a link to that in your chat function as well. If some of you are interested in joining that, you can register there at the link she provided as well. So those are all great resources. And if anybody has any additional questions, I'm sure that Ms. Rogers would be happy to answer those or give it a best shot this morning. I just have one. You mentioned Social Security and whether or not people can depend on that. What can we?
Oh.
All right. I think those are my questions I had this morning. If you have others, we could also have those over in the chat, but I just want to also just thank Ms. Rogers this morning for taking some time to come and chat with us about this. As we mentioned, this is a new requirement. It's a requirement for graduation this year. We want to make sure that our students have the skills and resources they need. We don't want our kids to be at any disadvantage. And so I appreciate all of you being here this morning to learn more about how you can make sure that they're getting the skills they need. So thank you, Ms. Rogers, for being here and sharing your morning with us a little bit. We will share out the PowerPoint presentation, and then also this is being recorded this morning. And so we'll post this session also on our website so that you can come back and check it out a little bit later if you want to, or share it with other folks in your program who didn't have an opportunity to join us this morning but could benefit from the information that was shared. So we appreciate all of you being here. Thank you for all of your hard work for our students and everything that you're doing out in the field every day, especially during this difficult time that we're all in, trying to navigate providing high quality educational services from a distance. So we appreciate all you are doing, and thank you, Ms. Rogers, for being here as well. Thanks everybody for joining us, and we will see you again soon.